Okay, I guess my question is, in 1302, did the students I've not had before, did you read Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock?
No. Oh wait, we didn't.
You were in my class, right?
Yeah, I've been in your class for 4 times.
Yeah, we did read it in my class. But I'm wondering, like, Heather, Emily, Logan, Joe,
No.
and Kaya, others, Mark, Kayla, Hayden. No, Hayden was with me.
In the spring.
In the spring. Did y'all read Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock?
No.
We talked about it.
We
Vaguely
talked
remember.
about it. We didn't read it.
You talked about it, but you never read it?
Yeah.
How's that work?
She
vaguely
She referenced
discussed
it.
She referenced
it was. She just said that we had to read it, but she like went over it in class like briefly.
So they didn't read it.
I don't remember what it was about, but I know I've heard the title. I probably remember it.
Did you say like she told you to read it?
No,
She did.
she didn't tell us to read it.
She
It was
just
not
told
a
us to
reading
read it.
summary.
She just went over.
Oh.
She was like, yeah.
Did she read it out loud?
I don't
No,
think so.
it was like a PowerPoint and like little points of what
It was like a bunch of different things that we went over.
I vaguely remember it.
It wasn't something.
It was a PowerPoint, but it was never assigned.
Yeah.
Okay.
Didn't we read it?
Her class was weird.
Yeah.
We read it. So I'll go over it briefly. Once again, we'll probably actually have time just enough for me to read it, cover a couple of major points, and then move on to Wasteland, because we don't need to. We need to spend as much time as we can on Wasteland, because what was that? Like, so I think we can get through Wasteland, or I think we can get through Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock without reading this little thing that I always read before Wasteland from the T.S. Eliot section. So we'll just go straight into Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, and we'll read it, and I'll I can give you the basics just before we start reading, because usually I don't like to do this, but I think in this case it's going to be okay. I believe 3 things are happening here in Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. Well, 2. 1, I think he wants to get a woman to make love with him. A common theme. Every single guy we've read seems to want that, and they're all considered the classic writers too. It's not like I picked and chose. That's a weird phrase, isn't it? Pick and choose, and I've never heard. You can't say I picked and chose. That doesn't sound right. It's more like I pick and choosed. And so it's a collective. Nobody cares. So yeah, all the writers were just writing about that stuff. It wasn't me making them. But he's wanting to make love with a woman here, and I think he wants to write a great poem. So he's talking about both sort of simultaneously. And then eventually he decides that the prospect of doing both, or either one of those things, the idea that critics might criticize him and that people might not approve of the things that he wants to do are so debilitating, he decides basically to do nothing at all. That's happened to all of us at least once, right? Where the prospect of, you feel like if people will judge you for doing whatever it is that you want to do, so you end up not doing it at all. How fun. Not fun, horrible, and kind of makes you sad. But let's read this, and I think I'll try to point out the parts along the way where that's happening. I won't read the Italian this time. Basically, it's just, it's from Dante, and it's a guy telling Dante as he's in, hell. He's like, hey, Dante says, what's your story, man? Why are you here in hell? And the guy says, hey, you know what? If I thought I was going to tell this to anybody who would ever relay this to the real world, I wouldn't tell you. But the fact that you're here in hell with me means you're never getting out of hell. So I can safely tell you, and nobody's ever going to know this embarrassing story. The problem is Dante's the guy who gets out of hell, and so they tells the guy an embarrassing story, then Dante goes and tells it to everybody else, us. So it's the one guy you probably shouldn't have told. The point, the nothing percent, literally, I don't even know if there's a number. There's got to be some number, because 10% of all people who have ever been alive are alive right now. Did you know that? 10% of all people who've ever lived are alive right now.
That's
crazy.
based on, because things really took off when we hit the Industrial Revolution. There were not very many people alive in the world at a time before the Industrial Revolution happened, and there's a heck of a lot alive right now. Like what, close to like 7 billion? That's a pretty big number, right? Yeah. Now that China's sort of racing India. India's like, we're going to keep having children, and China's like, we're going to do this whole only the one kid thing, or maybe two. And then India's got all these people, and then they're right next to China, and China says, we're going to lift the whole limit of 2 children thing. Just have at it. But I think at that point, everybody already nobody's going to be like, all right, 7 kids, here we go. Maybe they do, but I haven't seen any evidence of that yet. So Prufrock here, by the way, he's given that name on purpose. The love song, it's very romantic sounding, of J. Alfred Prufrock. It's a sexy name, right? Sexy.
Yeah.
Now, first, if you saw that name on like an online profile, you're like, oh, this guy, he's a looker. Like, he works out. No, it's not what you're thinking at all. You're like, this guy's
A nerd.
he's like one of those, like, nerd. There's like cool, nerd cool, like, what do they call it? Nerd chic. Like it's cool to be a nerd these days. Have you ever seen what was not super bad, but 21 Jump Street?
Yeah.
When like he's like, wow, like Channing Tatum shows up and he's all like punches a guy in the face the first day, and they're like, whoa, what are you doing, bro? And like it's like cool to be like nerds now, and like the characters he's like confused. He's like, this is when I should have gone to high school, and he's like, what's happening? I don't understand. This is not that time. This guy's like nerdy even by cool nerd standards. So you're like, oh yeah, we're all nerds, but that guy, like, he's a nerd, which is what I would have been in high school. I'm sure still they'd be like, oh yeah, we're a cool nerd, but that guy over there, like, golly. This is Prufrock. So he says, let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky. Now, how do you spread out things against the sky? What does the evening look like? It looks beautiful, right? Right? Well, what's the beautiful image you think to go with? Like a patient etherized upon a table. You ever thought about that? You're like, the stars are so beautiful in the sky, they remind me of a body lying on a table in a hospital.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's got game, guys. Let us go through certain half-deserted streets, the muttering retreats of restless nights and one-night cheap hotels, basically the places that you bring prostitutes. Or people you just want to have sex with real fast. Because this is back in the day when you didn't just stop at a hotel for like a night, because you didn't have ready access to cars. Everybody didn't. So it was like you went somewhere at a hotel, it was like for a week. So if you're there for just one night, you've got business on your mind. More like getting busy on your mind. And sawdust restaurants with oyster shells, like trashy restaurants. Streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent. Oh, what's that intent, brother? To lead you to an overwhelming question. Can we have sex? Oh, don't ask, what is it? Let us go and make our visit. Now, that's just my assumption about what the question is. It might not actually be that question. So he says, we're going to go visit this party first, then I'm going to ask you a question. And it says, in the room the wind come and go, talking of Michelangelo. Could be a classy party. And he kind of switches gears. This whole poem is switching gears. It's actually a good precursor. If you read this, then read The Wasteland, this sort of kind of sets you up for his style a little bit. So you can see just this, it's like little images one after the other. So I think he's actually composing his great poem here. The yellow fog that rubbed its back upon the window panes. I don't like that line. Let's revise it. The yellow smoke that rubbed its muzzle on the window panes. Licked its tongue into the corners of the evening, lingered upon the pools that stand in drains, let fall upon its back the soot that falls from chimneys, slipped by the terrace, made a sudden leap, and seeing that it was a tough October night, strolled once about the house and fell asleep. Kind of sounds like the smoke. It's yellow smoke fog at night, and kind of looks like a cat curling up. It's a beautiful image, like if you think about it. Kind of reminds me of, it's almost like he's given an Instagram filter. Like what's the one that makes things kind of yellow? Like you took like pictures of like steam at night, and you're like, oh look, there's some steam. And then later you're like, that's boring, it's just steam. And you're like, no. Oh, yellow looks kind of cool. And then you like take it. So he's like imagining things in like a colorized, like filtered world. Like he's creating this really cool image. It almost looks like a little kitty cat resting in the evening. The smoke suddenly slowing down since people are no longer walking through it. It's a cool image. But then he already starts to doubt himself. Well, no, not quite yet. Now he's like sounding confident, okay? Here's his confident paragraph. And indeed there will be time for the yellow smoke that slides along the street, rubbing its back upon the window panes. I'll write that poem and so much more. There will be time to prepare a face to meet the faces that you meet. There will be time to murder and create, and time for all the works and days of hands that lift and drop a question on your plate. Time for you, and time for me, and time yet for 100 indecisions, and for 100 visions and revisions before the taking of a toast and tea. He sounds confident. He's like, I've got all the time in the world, no worries there. And again he says, in the room the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. I actually thought that this is probably the most important in terms of what's happening here, line to the poem. The second one, because I think it snaps him back to reality, and from this point on he just sort of starts to slowly hate himself, which sucks. And indeed there will be time to wonder, do I dare, and do I dare? Time to turn back and descend the stair with a bald spot in the middle of my hair. They'll say how his hair is growing thin. My morning coat, my collar mounting firmly to the chin, my necktie rich and modest but asserted by a simple pin. They will say, but how his arms and legs are thin. He's thinking about how people are going to criticize him. Oh no. Do I dare disturb the universe? In a minute there is time for decisions and revisions, which a minute will reverse. Oh dear. He said, I got all the time in the world, but if I have all the time in the world and I make decisions and revisions, maybe those things will get reversed. Wouldst thou make love with me? No, I would not. Oh, well, I wasn't aware that would be an answer. Let's revise this. But would you? No. Oh, I thought if I asked again differently. How about, lady, thou art lovely in the evening. Wouldst thou? No. Okay. So now he's just sort of doubting himself. For I have known them all already, have known the evenings, mornings, afternoons. I've measured out my life with coffee spoons. I know the voices dying with a dying fall beneath the music from a farther room, so how should I presume? Always doubting, how should I even approach this? Because I know what everybody's like in there. I know them all. Like, you always think, like, he's got such an ego, really, about it. Like, he knows what all of their reactions will be. And he's like, I've known the eyes already, know them all, the eyes that fix you in a formulated phrase, and when I'm formulated sprawling on a pen, when I am pinned and wriggling on the wall, then how should I begin to spit out all the butt-ends of my days and ways, and how should I presume? And I think here's where he's talking about writing a great poem. He's like, I don't want to be pinned on the wall, wriggling like the critics pin, like you're some sort of biology project. They're just up close staring at you like, oh, yes, look at the thorax of this little bug. And I have known the arms, already known them all, arms that are bracelet and white and bare with the lamplight down with right brown hair. Is it perfume from a dress that makes me so digress? Arms that lie along a table wrapped by the shawl, and should I then presume, and how should I begin? Like, what the hell am I supposed to do to get started? How do I ask her to make love with me? How do I write this great poem? Here we go. He's going to start writing his great poem. Shall I say, I have gone at dusk through narrow streets and watched the smoke that rises from the pipes and lonely men in shirt sleeves leaning out of windows. He says, oh, that's stupid. So he says to himself, I should have been a pair of ragged claws scuttling across the floors of silent seas. That's actually probably a really great line. I think because it's a line where he's hating on himself, which he's very good at. He does that beautifully. Literally, the line itself sounds like a little crustacean scuttling across the seafloor. Like, that's what the line said. In the afternoon, the evening sleeps so peacefully, smoothed by long fingers, asleep, tired, or malingers, stretched on the floor here beside you and me. Should I, after tea and cakes and ices, have the strength to force the moment to its crisis? Crisis, eh? Do you want to make love? That's a crisis to him. Well, I guess to all of us it is really. You know, that the moment where you're going crazy in your head, probably. But I don't know if it's necessarily his first. But though I have wept and fasted, wept and prayed, though I have seen my head grown slightly bald, brought in upon a platter, I am no prophet, and here is no great matter. I've seen the moment of my greatness flicker, and I have seen the eternal footman hold my coat and snicker, and in short, I was afraid. So literally in this moment where he's considering whether or not he should ask a woman to make love with him, he sees himself as John the prophet, whose head was cut off to please Herod's wife. Like, that, this is that important to him. Like, he sees it. What an ego on this guy. He's so narcissistic. Does anybody know what that is? You know, narcissism. He's just this amazing sense of self-importance. Like, you have trouble even seeing something outside yourself. It would have been worth it, after all, after the cups, the marmalade, the tea, among the porcelain, among some talk of you and me. Would it have been worthwhile to have bitten off the matter with a smile, to have squeezed the universe into a ball, to roll it towards some overwhelming question, to say, I am Lazarus, Come from the dead to come back to tell you all. I shall tell you all. If one settling a pillow by her head should say, that's not what I meant at all. That is not it at all. So he asked the question, and he's like, now he's comparing himself to Lazarus come back from the dead. So he's like, okay, so I've died, and this is not going to happen. But I'm coming back from the dead. I'm Lazarus. I'm going to come back and say, no, will you make love with me? And she's like, no, not really, no. Oh, I'm sorry. He's like, well, okay. So he tries again without all the theatrics. Just starts listing things. You ever list things when you don't know what to say? You know, you're writing a paper and you're just like, I feel that cellular mitosis is incredibly important to biology because of the nucleus and the cell wall and the mitochondria, intestinal,
make myself feel smarter.
irritable bowel syndrome. You start like listing things you think go with stuff, and you're like, I don't know, just whatever. So you just start saying things, and I think that's what he does here. It becomes boring. And would it have been worth it after all? Would it have been worthwhile? After the sunsets and the dooryards and the sprinkled streets, the novels, the teacups, the skirts that trail along the floor, he realized what he's doing. And this and so much more. It's impossible to say just what I mean. As if a magic lantern threw the nerves and patterns on the screen. Would it have been worthwhile if one, settling a pillow or throwing off a shawl and turning toward the window, should say, oh, that is not it at all. That is not what I meant at all. So he revises, he fixes it in his head, still does it badly. She still says no. The poem still says, no, sir, I shall not be written. You suck. And he's like, okay.
Got it.
So he decides, this is crazy, but he decides he's a side character in his own life. No, I am not Prince Hamlet, nor was meant to be. Am an attendant lord, one that will do to swell a progress, start a scene or two, advise the prince. No doubt an easy tool, deferential, glad to be of use, politic, cautious, and meticulous. Full of high sentence, but a bit obtuse at times indeed. Almost ridiculous, almost at times. The fool. So he's saying here, no, I just sort of suck. I'm a side character, but it's in his life. So like in the journey of his life that is like the hero's journey, he's like a side character. Like he's the guy who comes up and says, sir, what would you like to do? Would you like me to fetch a pail of water? Like, and that's his job in his own life.
Alfred.
No, Alfred's cool.
Oh, okay.
This is more like waiter number 3. He says, I grow old, I grow old. I shall wear the bottoms of my trousers rolled. So he's like imagining, what's old life going to be like? Because, you know, he didn't ask the lady to make love with him, so now he's an old man. And he's having old man concerns. What? Yes, it's a sad man. Shall I part my hair behind? Whoa. Like, that's crazy.
You change your hair part?
Yeah, he's like, how do I do my hair today? That's some crazy concerns. Do I dare to eat a peach? Whoa. Eat a peach? Crazy day. Like, talk about insanity. I actually think that the reason he's asking, should I eat a peach, is I imagine
Old people like peaches.
old people might like peaches. I'm actually thinking he's worried about the peach because, you know, the peaches can give you the runs depending on how good your constitution is. I mean, many fruits off of trees can. These days, if you go to the store, you buy a peach, you're probably not going to have any. But if you just go and pick a fruit fresh off the tree like back in the day, you know, you might not have a constitution that's so well adapted to fruit juices. And anybody ever like drink too much apple juice or eat like a bunch of apples? You know, those citric acid type fruits can screw with your system. It hasn't happened to me before, but I've read about it. Actually, no, it has happened to me with apple juice. One time I went exclusively apple juice because I liked it at the college when I was attending there in the dorms. And I was like, what's wrong with me? And I talked to I read it and it said, oh yeah, apple juice can do that. I was like, oh, I'm drinking nothing but apple juice. No wonder. So I think he thinks, wow, do I dare to eat a peach today? I might have to go to the potty. He says, I shall wear white flannel trousers and walk upon the beach. Now, I don't know if this is actually what's meant, but I've always liked to imagine that the biggest thing, his concern in the end of his life is, do I eat a peach that could give me the runs while I'm wearing white flannel trousers and walking out on the beach nowhere near home, so I might actually poop my pants?
I don't know if he was going for that, but
I don't know either, but I really like my image. So that's a really depressing image of old age. Like, can I make it back home before somebody sees my poop pants? Like, that's a weird.
Yeah, so I should work for out pants.
But then he says, I have heard the mermaids singing each to each, and I do not think that they will sing to me. And I think here the mermaids represent two things. It's his genius that he uses mermaids, because it's sirens that could call you to your death. Y'all have heard of those before in mythology, right? It's like, oh, they sing so pretty, and oh, they eat me. But it could also be the muses, those which inspire, those which make you think of the great things that you write. And he says, I have seen them riding seaward on the waves, combing the white hair of the waves blown back when the wind blows the water white and black. And I love the sounds in the lines. It's W's, B's, and L's, so it's blah, 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 blah. So it's water. It's words about water that sound like water. It's genius. And I think he is inspired. He's just too worried about taking the risk to actually do it. He says, we have lingered in the chambers of the sea by sea-girls wreathed with seaweed red and brown till human voices wake us and we drown. And I actually think those lines sound a little bit electrical. I've always thought. So it's like S's and R's and kind of these weird TH and E sounds that kind of, I don't know, it kind of make the E's sound like electrical, the letters that they follow. I can't explain that, but in the chambers of the sea by sea-girls wreathed with seaweed red and brown. It's constantly like my mouth is going yee, and then just like S's and R's and things are messing with it. So it's like chambers of the sea by sea-girls wreathed with seaweed red and brown. That's how my mouth feels when I'm doing that. So it's almost like an electrical sensation of like the words are being... Electricity, I think, was often thought of like as of the gods. You know, like that's one of the reasons they think that Zeus was even imagined was as a way to explain the phenomenon of thunder and lightning. And it's like, okay, lightning, so Zeus is the reason there's lightning. There's a god that creates and controls lightning. So anything that you say, oh, that's Zeus. You know, what do they have in Norse mythology? The same thing as like Thor is the lightning god.
Yeah.
So they needed a way to explain these natural phenomena, so they said, oh, it's a god doing this. So there's just that spiritual nature of electricity. And he says, till human voices wake us and we drown, because that's how we are, right? We are about to do something great. And nobody's going to see this on the video, but who has changed their major because like family has told them that that's not a viable way to make money? Yeah, it happens. And that's just the ones who said yes, like openly. Like there's probably 4 others who are like, I don't want to risk raising my hand so somebody sees that I raise my hand and tells my parents that I don't really want to do what I want to do with my life or something like that. But it's like, I remember like one time I walked in like the pizza place, like tell my parents like and my preacher that, oh, I was going to become a youth minister. And they said, why don't you get a job first that you can make money at? Then you decide to become a preacher. And so I never became a preacher or a youth minister, not a preacher. Let's be honest. I probably chose youth minister because it just seems so fun. You know what I mean? You ever like have your youth ministers? Hi guys, we're all gonna go to camp and have a great time. You're like, yay! And, like it just seems like it's a wonderful job. So I think that was probably the real reason. But still, it's like people talk you out of doing the things you want to do all the time in your life. You know, working a job where it's got steady hours, steady pay, can pay back your school loans, that kind of thing. Like, and that ends up being like the main concern. So. I think I covered all the main ideas there. Enough for the quiz. Because there's only 3 questions on the quiz that are love song. The rest are all wasteland. Hopefully nobody was hoping to use love song and their knowledge of it from last semester is like their crutch to get through the quiz because it's like almost all wasteland. Let's see. So I always like to start by reading the little thing that comes before. Actually, I read the part of it. It's from Eliot first on 2708 in your book if you've got it and want to look at it. I think this helps to get us started. Then we can start asking questions and talking. I'll probably go through it kind of like I did with Love Song just now, and I'll try to like read it as we go. But I'm not going to try to. I don't think I'm going to read it as fast as I was doing Love Song. I was only doing that because we didn't have a lot of time. Actually, I think it might start on 27. Yeah, it starts on 2707. So, in the bottom half of the next to last paragraph, it says, one side of Eliot's poetic genius is romantic, And that was the end of a sentence. And it says, the symbolist influence on his imagery, his elegiac lamentation over loss and fragmentation, his interest in the evocative and the suggestive, lines such as, I don't like that sentence. But it is combined with a dry, ironic allusiveness, and that's allusiveness, meaning like he is relating things to outside. He's making references to other things. That's what allusion is, not illusion. A play of wit and satire, and a colloquial element, which is like common everyday things that he has that's particular to a certain area, which are not normally found in poets of the Romantic tradition. And this is where it gets kind of really relating to the Wasteland. Eliot's real novelty, and the cause of much bewilderment when his poems first appeared, was his deliberate elimination of all merely connective and transitional passages, his building up of the total pattern of meaning through the immediate juxtaposition of images without overt explanation of what they're doing, together with his use of oblique references to other works of literature, some of them quite obscure to most readers of his time. And Prufrock represents a symbolic landscape where the meaning emerges from the mutual interaction of the images, and that meaning is enlarged by echoes, often ironic, of Hesiod and Dante and Shakespeare. And then he talks specifically about the Wasteland. The Wasteland is a series of scenes and images with no author's voice intervening to tell us where we are, but with the implications developed through multiple contrasts and through analogies with older literary works, often referred to in a distorted quotation or half-concealed allusion. Again, that's allusion, like a relationship to an outside thing, a reference. Furthermore, the works referred to are not necessarily central in the Western literary tradition. Besides Dante and Shakespeare, there's a lot, listen to all these that were in the Wasteland. There are pre-Socratic philosophers, major and minor 17th century poets and dramatists, works of anthropology, history, and philosophy, texts of Buddhism and Hinduism, even popular songs and vaudeville. Ancient and modern voices, high and low art, Western and non-Western languages clash, coincide, jostle alongside one another. And in a culture where the poet's public might lack a common cultural heritage, a shared knowledge of the works of the past, Eliot felt it necessary to accumulate his own body of references. In this, his use of earlier literature differs from, say, John Milton's. Both poets are difficult for the modern reader who need editorial assistance in recognizing and understanding many of the allusions, but Milton was drawing on a body of knowledge common to educated people in his day. Nevertheless, this aspect of Eliot can be exaggerated. His imagery and the movement of his verse set the tone he requires, establish the area of meaning to be developed, so that even a reader ignorant of mostly literary allusions can often get the feel of the poem and achieve some understanding of what it says. Remember I said there was all these footnotes? Like tons of footnotes. Did y'all try to like keep up with the footnotes as you read at first, or did you just read the whole thing straight through with no footnotes?
I read through with the footnotes the first time.
I had to read the footnotes.
Had to read the footnotes?
Yeah.
Footnotes. Originally, when this was published in the Criterion, which I believe was the name of the periodical that he published it in London, no footnotes, nothing.
Oh, God.
Yeah, so it's just people just read it. And in the first lines here of The Wasteland, he references Ezra Pound, and it says Il Miglior Fabbro, which I believe means the better craftsman. Lots of lines were taken out by Ezra Pound, like about 122 of them, I think, as they found when the original drafts were released in 1971. But crap, I don't remember where I was going.
You were talking about footnotes.
Yes. So Ezra Pound hooked him up with a publisher and said, hey, there's this great poem, read it. And the guy was like, wow, I really do want to publish this. And he's like, it's exciting and it's new. And it became almost an instant classic when it came out. Like people were like, wow, this is a really important poem. The problem was the guy wanted to sell it to people to buy. And how many of you have ever bought a 13-page book, like on Amazon or anything? Like I'm talking about not Kindle. I'm talking like an actual physical copy of a book that was like 13 pages long. Like no, like nobody would ever do that. It's a pamphlet. Imagine like, I mean, it's still like 120 pages a copy, right? That's not you don't have a subscription to Game Informer. You went to GameStop you did the rewards program, and they said, we'll throw in this game in form of subscription. Isn't that right? They changed that, and now you have to pay for it?
Children's books
No, that's
on
right.
Amazon.
No, I got it a long, long time ago. I got a long time.
But not through GameStop.
Mine is
It's GameStop.
Okay, you know what? Sorry, excuse me for myself.
Well, I used to work at GameStop, and that's how
Oh,
we...
you did?
Yeah, you do like you would do the used game thing, and then you would try to like sell, like the whole point of the GameStop thing was to sell people the magazine subscription, basically. So that was why they offered and you wanted all those used games so you could. So imagine reading this and not having any footnotes. And he didn't want you to have any footnotes. The only reason he provided footnotes was one of the reasons he was worried that when people saw this, they would say, this isn't meant to be anything. Like, he has no idea what he's doing. Like, he's just putting a bunch of stuff together and, like, we're looking at it. And, like...
That was me.
Yeah, you're just like, there's no point to it. So he provided the footnotes to show... Basically, for two reasons. One is that it gave more words so that when it was published as an actual text, it would be thick enough people would not feel bad about buying it. It would be like, it would beef up the paper copy enough that like people wouldn't feel, guilty about buying this little. Because I bought a book called The Homeric Hymns and Hesiod's Theogony, and they're like that long a piece, and I just felt bad about purchasing them. I was like, this is only this big. Like, I shouldn't even like bought this. It's so tiny. And I think that there's something to be said about trying to just read it without having any of the footnotes. I actually did that yesterday for the first time, and I didn't read it straight through without footnotes, actually. Because I can't do that physically. I don't think if I have the book in front of me and I'm able to read footnotes, I'm going to read the footnotes. I'm going to be like, what was this again? And I'll go look. I'm like, oh, yeah. So what I did was I found on the podcast app, there was some like British podcast that had put out like a dramatic reading with like 6 different people of this poem. And I didn't think it was very good. I thought it was kind of, the voice acting was lame, except for one guy. Like, he was really good all the time. But I was like, I wouldn't read that way. And that just could be my ego saying, it's not quite right. But this one guy, he was really serious and like got it really, but he wasn't like overly like dramatic like some of them were being. So, but I finally heard it without having any of the footnotes there to listen to. I was just listening. Oh, and they put this stupid music in between like all the sections. So stupid. I wonder if I can actually, like, I thought it was like way too dramatic for this poem. Let me see. I'm not going to play like the whole thing. I just wanted you to hear like the hello.
Rhapsodize Audio
Blah blah blah.
Performed by Ben
Blah blah.
once viewed as wild
Blah,
and
blah.
enduring, as it moves from the purely visceral
Nah.
to painting his constant
Nope.
made bubble and things for a little less when the good Anna of one of the most eminent of the idiots, Gertrude Stein,
What the heck?
and itself. Whether one wishes to admit it or not,
Her head, or throw one hat away. Such tragedy is palpable, and therefore usually ignored, especially by people in Kansas City.
Now I understand. It deleted the episode. And I'm playing the most recent one because apparently I subscribed. I don't remember doing that. I was like, I don't hear anything about...
Rhapsodize Audio, Bob Lee Deacon.
This music plays like the whole time.
April is the cruelest month,
You hear?
breeding lilacs out of the dead land, mixing memory and desire,
Sounds like freaking Siri.
stirring dull roots with spring rain.
Oh, yes, sir.
Winter kept us warm, covering earth in forgetful snow, feeding a little life with dried tubers. Summer surprised us.
I'm so bored.
He said in the winter,
Clutch what branches grow out of this stony rubbish. And
Where's the music? Music. I'm like, really? Like, that's not what I get when I read this at all. That's not it at all. I get Like, just something that's sort of disquieting. In fact, it probably is just as effective if I get something closer to... You've probably heard this before, but only in a comedic context. I get something closer to this. You ever heard of Adagio for Strings by Barber? You ever heard of that? Do you know what it is offhand? If like you just, oh, I know that song in my head. Or have you just heard of it? You've heard it, but you probably only heard it like in a comedic context, like with like somebody took a vine that was sad and then put this music in the background. I've seen it with one with a guinea pig who's staring instead of eating. I think this is the one. Oh, in fact, I think I have a better one. I think I have the one that I like the most because I've already got that one saved. Where is documents? No, music. I hate when that happens, when you click a song and then it like music? There it is. Y'all heard that song? Can you hear it? Oh, you have to have the projector on to hear things? Yeah, I think it'll start almost immediately.
It's like turning the sound down in the car to see.
It's going to be really loud, isn't it? Yeah. Y'all heard that song? Yeah, well, you'd have to hear the beat. I think it makes sense to listen to music when talking about reading this because I think it's supposed to function actually like music. It's supposed to just sort of wash over you and not really make a lot of sense. This is closer to what I get. Something sad and like just, I don't know why I'm sad, but I'm sad. Like there's another song from the movie Arrival. Have you ever seen that movie?
I'm sorry.
The one about the stupid kid.
This is going to be really loud.
Hey.
Have y'all heard this song?
Oh my god.
Listen! Have you heard this song?
No, I don't think I have.
Just music that's sad. You don't know why. Wait. Let me see if I can get to the part.
Oh.
It's like a cello violin thing. You heard it?
What? You're asleep.
Well, here, I want you to tell me real quick. I want you to tell me what do the notes mean? What are they referring to in real life? What are they trying to point to? What is this song talking about? But see, this is weird. Okay, see, this is where it gets kind of weird. Okay, so that's something we don't when we take like instrumental music, right? I mean, people in band play that music all the time, right? You're like, oh yeah, music, and unless it's like Christmas time, you're playing music that doesn't necessarily have some sort of other meaning associated to it. You're just playing like, you know, like we had our fight song. Please don't tell me your fight song is not the New Year's song, is it?
No, that's our school song.
Okay, good. What's your fight? Like, sing your fight song off the top of your head.
We don't have a...
It's just the music you play when you score a touchdown. What's that? Okay, now what do those notes mean? What is it trying to say and talk about? Like, what's the story of the song?
Victory.
Good job, go.
Well, I think you're assuming that. I mean, like, what is like if that song is telling a story? What is the story? Who are the characters? What's happening?
Let's see, it's the love.
That'd be very hard to do it.
So it's like I don't know, it's like overcoming
It's like 40 measures.
Yeah, but see, you're talking about abstract emotions. You're trying to put emotions onto it. You're not actually telling a physical story with a character and names and stuff.
Washington.
It's kind of just whatever.
Washington.
Washington Lee Swing. I don't know.
Well, there were a lot. It's a lot. Most of us, I think, these days, when we listen to music voluntarily, correct me if I'm wrong, you're listening to music that has lyrics, right? And you can at least say, this is what the song means. Like, it's these words that they're telling me, and sometimes you have to go read the lyrics to fully make sense of it. Sometimes it tells a very coherent story that's easy to follow. Like, I used to love a band called Death Cab for Cutie, because all their songs were just these little little short stories that you could read, and like it was about like, oh, it's a kid with his mom and they're driving down the street at night and I don't know why they're alone, but they're alone, and their relationship's very important. And it felt like I was learning like words, and the words had meaning. But with songs like even things like fight songs, which feel like victory, you don't really know. You just sort of let the feeling wash over you, don't you?
Yeah.
Well, Eliot was a huge fan of like going to like music halls, and he loved music. Additionally, Ezra Pound didn't just help him. He helped. Ezra Pound was really important to getting people like. Have you ever heard of James Joyce? Oh yeah, I'm sure you have. You may not know it, but we just read The Dead. But he helped get a book called Ulysses made, which actually was banned, I think, in America for like 40, 60 years, something like that, because it had like a scene of a guy masturbating on a beach.
Me too.
And
I've got no doubt about that.
he was actually really important in Robert Frost and Ernest Hemingway,
Of course.
getting them started as well. Which you think Robert Frost is nothing like Eliot,
No.
but Ezra Pound was incredibly good at narrowing things down that other people had written to their component images, and so it's really just meant to be like a collection of images that work together. Have you ever seen the stuff that was happening around the time was very similar with other people as well. Gertrude Stein wrote poems that were just like a description of little images. And have y'all ever heard of Pablo Picasso?
Yes.
He painted those weird images. You could tell it was a face, but it obviously was not a face. I think it's almost like trying to separate us, in a sense, from the animals and like how we create meanings of things. Like, if you see a painting of a person, sometimes a dog, dogs can watch TV. You ever noticed that before? Some dogs can. Watch it and be like barking at the dogs on TV. But if Picasso painted like a dog and showed that to the dog would not be upset. Dog would be like, I don't know, that's just a bunch of colors, but we would go, oh, it's kind of like a dog, because we can make those kinds of analytic, but the dog is like, I don't know. So it's a way of separating us from the animals, because we can make meaning out of a collection of images in ways that animals can't. So it's like kind of like the height of our experience. Eliot loved music. He loved music halls and going and like observing those sorts of things. So I think this really is meant to just sort of wash over you, almost like a piece of music, the feeling of it. And you're not necessarily always supposed to know what it means. He has things that he was referencing, but not because he wanted you to necessarily know what he was referencing at all times. And I think in some cases he went back and said, oh, I probably got this line from this thing, but he wasn't actually thinking of that when he did it. It was just something he had to go back and do later so people would be interested in, this tiny little text that he made and want to buy it. So he had to provide all these footnotes. And then it's almost like the footnotes became the thing people were buying it for. They're like, oh, yes, it's this massive, really difficult to understand thing, when you weren't necessarily even supposed to try to understand it. You're supposed to kind of read it and go, I feel uncomfortable and I don't know why. Did the fact that y'all couldn't understand it was one of the main reasons you felt uncomfortable?
Yes.
And I think that's supposed to be sort of the thing. And you see like two people have sex and it seems that neither one of them seems to care, and you're like, that makes me uncomfortable. And you got like dead people walking on a bridge and you're like, I'm kind of uncomfortable with that. I don't like the bats with the baby faces.
Yeah.
I don't like when we're in a desert with rocks and no water and it's making me thirsty, but I can't have water because it's saying there is no water.
Yeah.
I'm confused and I don't like it. It just makes me upset.
One thing that also made me upset was like there was like little to no punctuation in part 5. And I was reading aloud because that's how I can actually get some things.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was no break. And it's funny because that's the part where it's talking about how there's no water. And I was actually getting thirsty because I was having to continuously read this with no breaks.
I think that he wants that.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of clever.
I actually didn't even like the way the people read it on here, like on that recording that I listened to, because he was like, if there were the rocks and no water. If there was a rock and a little water, a little dry garret, a little. But he was reading it like line by line, very slowly, and I felt like it was like if there were rocks but no water, and no water but there's rocks, and like I was just going quickly, like I'm panicked.
Yeah, like I was reading it like a rambled kind of like upset person would.
And I think that it should be, but then, of course, maybe that's just how I feel the music.
Yeah.
Maybe you feel the music different.
I mean,
Maybe you can't find the music.
Maybe you can't find it.
Okay.
There's no music.
Okay, Casper.
There's an instrumental piece called Pablo, and it was like based on Pablo Picasso. Like,
Does it sound like craziness?
Oh my god, it made me so
insane.
confused and unhappy.
Talk to me about that piece and I might hear about it.
It was like our first 5-page piece with like, what, 600 plus measures?
Yeah. Hey,
It was
the
awful.
most hateful piece on the planet.
I was rather annoyed when I went to A&M Commerce and I was in the band the second semester. I was like, I think second or third chair in the second band. I didn't play the first semester because I was like, there's no competitions. I don't want to do this. And then they told me like the scholarship that I got for band, like I had to play at least one semester. And I was like, ugh. So I tried out and like I literally hadn't, you know how hard it is to like come back after summer when you haven't put the instrument to your lips and to like play again. You're like, well, I hadn't played in 7 months, and then I had to audition. I was like, and they were like, yeah, you're not in the first band. And I was like, I understand. My apologies. But then it was really funny because you're in the band with like the second band, and like I don't know what it is about people who are in like the second band. They have such big heads. Like, I don't know what it is, but they're always like, I'm so good. And you're like, no, you're in the second band. Like, it's not in the first band, it's the second band. And they would always just be like, oh, you're not playing that right. And I was like, okay. And it was just like all the time. But there was this one song that like, it eluded everybody. It was kind of like the one you were talking about where it's like, it was just a bunch of sounds in the beginning, and then eventually it all came together into a song. Yeah. It was like people were just going like, and it just sounded like that from the whole band for like a minute and a half, 2 minutes. And then like amongst all that craziness, eventually we all just went, and like we start playing together, and everybody's like, what the hell? Like, and my parents were like watching, like, what is this? I don't know what this is. My dad's confused. He just wants to see like, my dad's favorite thing was like when my brother did the cymbals. He was like, oh, that's crazy. I can see that. He didn't know what I was doing. He was like, I don't even know what notes he's playing. And I don't know that this is necessarily supposed to feel like that with that much craziness. I think he wants us to like get almost like a musicality like at times. I just don't know like what exactly he's looking for. Now there is something I could probably tell you in terms of making order of this, which I don't really think that he necessarily wanted you to be able to make order of it. But the notes are there, so you can try if you want. Did I see a flash?
Yeah.
That's what I thought. It was like I saw a flash. It wasn't pointed at me, was it?
No.
Oh, okay, good. We trying to find something in the dark. Sometimes I do that. I'm like, oh, I didn't. I cannot believe they like the person who came up with, what if he just uses a flashlight instead of just flashing on photos? And I was like, that person's a genius.
Yeah.
And they made an app, and then Apple said, we're just going to make our own that's built into the interface. And that person was like, now I get no money anymore. Poor person. Sometimes I still go to the flashlight app, you know, just to support that guy because he was a genius. I'm kidding. I deleted the app years ago. I was like, oh, he's such a nice guy. Oh, no, he's really as bad as he seems. So on the Wasteland description, it's a little difficult to get into, but on 2713, it talks about the myth of the Fisher King. Have y'all heard of that before? Did y'all read that part? The Fisher King bit?
Yeah, that's part 4. Yeah.
That can kind of start to help you understand a little bit about what's going on in this. And I think it kind of pervades the entire poem. So it says here, like, I'm going to actually go sort of, yeah, we'll go ahead and start reading from the Wasteland like description, just all of it here. On page 2713. It's actually before the poem itself starts. And it says, in the essay Ulysses, Order and Myth, Eliot hinted at the ambitions of the Wasteland when he declared that others would follow James Joyce in manipulating a continuous parallel between contemporaneity and antiquity. It is simply a way of controlling, of ordering, of giving a shape and significance to the immense panorama of futility and anarchy which is contemporary history. It is, I seriously believe, a step toward making the modern world possible in art. And Eliot labeled this new technique the mythical method. So things are constantly getting, I mean, you have like an age that's like being partly dominated by like the introduction of machines. The wars aren't really fought with just like people on battlefields anymore. I think very famously didn't America win the war against the British and get their independence by essentially doing some sort of form of guerrilla warfare, wasn't it? Whereas like they did not dress in obvious uniforms. They kind of concealed themselves, which was like one start. But then you have things like machine guns coming out and airplanes that drop bombs. Things are just getting weird. Like this, like war is different now. It's not just people on a battlefield. You have planes bombing people who are on the battlefield. So you got to think around that, and nobody is, and nobody's really sure what to do with the modern and what do we do with it. So he actually helped start and become a proponent of the movement called modernism, where it's trying to figure out how to incorporate the modern world and all of its crazy changes. So it's weird. You read this poem and you're like, wow, this is definitely something different than I've ever seen before. It feels like some new movement in poetry. But all it does, the whole poem, is talk about how, man, I wish we could get back to the way things were while doing it in a new way, which is such a strange decision. But that's almost how all of modernism was. And that's what he's talking about as necessary and what he saw in James Joyce. And it says here, he gave another clue to the theme and structure of The Wasteland in a general note, in which he stated that not only the title, but the plan and a good deal of the symbolism of the poem were suggested by Miss Jessie L. Weston's book on the Grail legend, From Ritual to Romance, 1920. This book is not a book that any of you should have heard of, or read. Not like, oh yes, there's Homer's The Odyssey, the Iliad, Ovid's Metamorphoses, Virgil's Aeneid, and Jessie L. Weston's From Ritual to Romance. Now, this is just a description of the Grail legend and its importance throughout history. It says he further acknowledged a general indebtedness to Sir James Fraser's Golden Bough, 13 volumes from 1890 to 1915, especially the volumes Adonis, Attis, and Osiris, in which Fraser deals with ancient vegetation myths and fertility ceremonies. Fertility and regeneration and unchecked growth and checked growth that can't happen, those are really key here. You see there's no water but we have rock, people who are having sex but not to have children, all kinds of just weird things seem to be happening without fertility and without regeneration. And it says drawing a material from Fraser and other anthropologists, Weston traces the relationship of these myths and rituals to Christianity, and especially to the legend of the Holy Grail. She finds an archetypal fertility myth in the story of the Fisher King, which I had never heard of before. And the Fisher King, whose death, infirmity, or impotence, because there are many different forms of the myth, as there are with Greek mythology, right? Y'all ever notice that some stories will say this person did this thing, and in other stories things happen completely differently, depending on who told the tale and when it happened. Let me see. Brought drought and desolation to the land and failure of the power to reproduce themselves among both humans and beasts. So the Fisher King, he dies, and then desolation has come to the land, and it's infertile. And this symbolic wasteland can be revived only if a questing knight goes to the Chapel Perilous, situated in the heart of it, and there asks certain ritual questions about the Grail or Cup, and the lance, which are originally fertility symbols, female and male respectively, the Grail being the female symbol and the lance being the male symbol. And asking these questions properly revives the king and restores fertility to the land. The relation of this original Grail myth to fertility cults and rituals found in many different civilizations and represented by stories of a god who dies and is later resurrected shows their common origin in a response to the cyclical movement of the seasons, with vegetation dying in winter to be resurrected again in the spring. Christianity, according to Weston, gave its own spiritual meaning to the myth. It did not hesitate to utilize the already existing medium of instruction, but boldly identified the deity of vegetation, regarded as life principle, with the God of the Christian faith. And the Fisher King is related to the use of the fish symbol in early Christianity. You've ever seen the Jesus fish, and you're like, why is there a Jesus fish? You're like, oh, because that one time he cut it up and made a whole bunch of fish for people. That's not one. It's because in essence, like Jesus dying and then resurrecting is like another version of the story of the Fisher King. It's like death, rebirth. And I'm not saying that's where I'm just saying where the origin of the fish came from, not like, oh, that's why they made the Jesus story up. I'm not saying that.
The Jesus story is fake.
Let's see. The Fisher King is related to the use of the fish. Weston states with certainty that the fish is a life symbol of immemorial antiquity, and that the title of Fisher has, from the earliest ages, been associated with the deities who were held to be specially connected with the origin and preservation of life. So the fish is a symbol of that, as is water, because water then brings fertility to the plants. It also brings life to the fish, and then in that kind of sense of things. Now, I've underlined this next part, so I guess I'm going to read it, but I don't remember ever having thought it was especially important, but I guess I have. Eliot, following Weston, thus uses a great variety of mythological and religious material, both Western and Eastern, to paint a symbolic picture of the modern wasteland and the need for regeneration. He vividly presents the terror of that desiccated life, its loneliness, emptiness, and irrational apprehensions, as well as its misuse of sexuality. But he paradoxically ends the poem with a benediction. I think I actually forgotten the meaning of the word benediction, but I think it's a hopeful prayer type deal? That could be wrong. A prayer that asks for God's blessing. Yeah, so sometimes I love when I look into the dictionary and I'm like, I don't know if I know the meaning of this word, and I look it up and it's what I said, and I'm like English teacher points. Of course, if I just had not looked up the word in the first place, that would be better. But, the mass death and social collapse of World War I informed the poet's vision of a wasteland strewn with corpses, wreckage, and ruin. And I was actually looking at some stuff in addition to this that said that almost all the street references and stuff and like river references, you may notice like it says Sweet Thames or Thames, y'all might have read, but it's pronounced Thames. Leicester, Queen Victoria Street. Those are all right next to where he worked. Do y'all know what Eliot did as a job? No. I mean, he did write poetry, but he had a full-time job.
Doesn't it say in one of the footnotes?
Guess what his job was.
He wasn't an English speaker.
He was not.
Yeah, that's it.
You were like, that's classic Nichols misdirection. Yeah. I'll give you a hint, and it won't help you at all. CIF.
Oh, actually, God, he traded something. He was a merchant, wasn't he?
Ah, that's pretty good. Yeah, he worked at a bank.
Yeah, CIF.
He was a bank teller. Well, he was more than just a bank teller. What he did was he read the foreign papers every day. He worked at Lloyd's Bank in London, and he read the papers every day, foreign papers, because he was really smart. Did y'all know he went to Harvard? Did I mention that? Yes, I think he has a PhD from Harvard. Not just like, oh, I went to Harvard and got kicked out, like a lot of poets, that kind of is their story. He went to Harvard, got his degree all the way to doctorate, and then I guess went to go work in a bank after that, which is strange.
Yeah, it says in the footnotes that he actually wrote his doctorate thesis over one of the works he references in Part 5.
Yes, but I can't remember which one it was.
Shunan, something like that. The one that starts with the U.
Yeah, the Upanishad?
Yes.
I think that's it. But yeah, he knew more than one language, so he would read these foreign papers every day and then make a report every day to the bank saying how he thought this would affect their finances and where they should invest.
So it's kind of like an economist?
Kind of. And so a lot of his concerns are economic. So it says here that he's talking specifically about sexual wasteland and war wasteland, but he was one of the people that...
more concerned.
When there was the Treaty of Versailles, y'all have heard of that?
Yes.
And then basically a week after the Treaty of Versailles expired, that's when World War II broke out?
Basically.
Basically caused World War II.
Yeah, it was a temporary armistice, and all the financial decisions, basically what the restrictions they made to the European finances and Germany's finances as a part of the Treaty of Versailles, they sucked. And it really helped ruin some of their economies.
Yeah.
It was one of those things where
instead of punishing Germany, they should have tried to help them get better. But instead they just punished them, so the Germans were like angry at everyone.
They put all the blame on Germany when Germany wasn't even like the major beginning of World War I.
And Eliot, he felt like with a theory of a guy at the time, there was some guy who had a theory that as soon as that treaty was over, the time was up, war would break out again. And Eliot had that same theory. He's like, I agree with this guy. And it was right. Yeah. So he wasn't just talking about sexual war wasteland. He was talking about kind of an economic wasteland as well.
It's kind of actually funny. It's like, now that you say that, like he kind of predicted the way the economy turned out. When he's also talking about tarot cards in the beginning, like, and that's a practice of divination. So in a way, his job was quite literally divination for the economy.
Yeah, he kind of did. He kind of had to predict the future for his bank.
Yeah, so
every day.
That's really funny that he mentioned the tarot card thing.
It is. I did not consider that, and how he essentially did the same thing, but in less of a freaky way.
Yeah, less of a superstitious way.
There is a level of superstition to stock trading, though, except nowadays where most of the stocks are traded. I think 40 to 60% of stocks are traded on the market by machines. AI.
You would know more than that.
It's very interesting. So, now that we've talked about the poem, I think it makes more sense to just read it. So, let's read through this thing. I'm going to try as hard as I can to just get to the end of a little section that I think is a section, then move on to the next thing, like then talk about what was in it, but I'll probably stop every once in a while and talk about it because I can't help myself. So I will start here with, I'm not going to read that, I don't even know what language that is, Latin and Greek.
Latin and Greek, yeah.
And I heard a guy on the thing read it, and I was like, oh, Latin sounds a lot different than I thought it did. But essentially it says they were talking to the Sibyl, and she said, I want to die, because Sibyl had asked for...
She had been given eternal life because she's one of the prophets of Apollo or whatever, but she forgot to ask him for eternal youth as well.
Yeah, that's not so great.
She's just forever growing old.
So I said, hey, Sybil, what do you want? And she says, I want to die. And it's like, oh, okay, so the cool thing you got, now you don't want it anymore. I always imagine she must look like, y'all seen Little Mermaid?
Yes.
You know, like, when people, they don't pay their debt back to her, and they're like these little things, they're like, meh, like just on the ocean floor. That's what I think that she must have looked like in that. Like just a bunch of like bones laying there with cartilage attached and like skin laying on bones. Like, what do you want? Oh my God. So basically, that's a regeneration and fertility thing too, if you think about it. Like, if you've got all the life in the world, so you can. I mean, think about it. Today we kind of are Sybil, like our society. You know, it's almost self-sustaining because we've got so much. So many people doing so many jobs. It's like we don't actually farm anymore, you know? Yeah. Like we go to Walmart and the stuff we want to eat is just there. Yeah. Basically anything we want. And we go home and electricity just arrives. Like we don't have to worry about any of these. They're like, how do we get water? It just shows up. As long as we pay somebody money, we get clean water.
How do we get water, Mom? It just happens.
It's like, where does water come from, Mom? Well, plumbers, I think. Like, I have no idea how. Like, I mean, I've been told before, like, somehow it gets from a river or a lake. They dammed a river somewhere, and then a lake happened, and then the lake water gets into my tap. I don't know. A lot of different people do a lot of different things to make that happen, but I don't know, like, the specific. So we kind of are like Sybil today. We have the eternal life, but we haven't asked for perpetual youth. So in terms of, like, we've got all the technology and science that's going to, like, provide for us and make us okay, but we're still, like, functional idiots when it comes to relating to each other, because the same crap that was happening in, like, 400 to 1000 BC, we're still doing to each other, like, on a daily basis. We're still idiots and worried about power. We can't seem to get past this whole sex thing. Like, that's something that we still, like, we can't seem to, like, you know, it's just, it cripples us, and people do terrible things that have, like, sexual or animal urges, and we're not yet who we could be. You know, we're just not. So we're kind of like a societal version of the Sibyl here. And then he dedicates it to Ezra Pound. And I'm going to try to read from here to the other thing, and it's going to suck. Because you're going to be confused, and that's supposed to happen. Let's all... It's going to really distract me if I hear like little voices in the background. So as I do like the reading part, like I want everybody to like participate like once we get to like the discussion sections, but like once we're doing the reading parts, try to like just take it in. See how uncomfortable you feel by it. Yeah, I guess I could have phrased that better. Somebody was like, oh. I was like, what? April is the cruelest month. I'm already stopping. Somebody mentioned that this is like Chaucer. Remember, like April with his showers sweet, and like April is like the time of springtime, and it's wonderful. And he's sitting here like April is the cruelest month.
April sucks.
Because springtime, the winter's over, and we used to be warm in the winter. Now the spring is.
I disagree.
It's a very interesting opinion, which I disagree with, but
yeah.
But I think I see he's just trying to subvert images. All the images that we're used to, he's trying to turn them on their head so that we feel uncomfortable.
That's what I thought.
April is the cruelest month, breeding lilacs out of the dead land, mixing memory and desire, stirring dull roots with spring rain. What is that?
It was an alarm.
Oh, an alarm, okay.
I don't know why.
Winter kept us warm, covering earth in forgetful snow, feeding a little life with dried tubers. Summer surprised us coming over the Starnbergersee with a shower of rain. We stopped in the colonnade and went on in sunlight into the Hofgarten, and drank coffee and talked for an hour. Bin gar kein Russen, stam aus Litwen, ich Deutsch. I don't know if that's right at all. And when we were children, staying at the Archduke's, my cousin's, he took me out on a sled, and I was frightened. He said, Marie, Marie, hold on tight. I have no idea if that's the right accent.
Why are you doing Italian? They're German.
No idea. Like, I don't know German. Marie. Wait, I don't know. I don't got German right now. It's gone. And down we went. In the mountains there, you feel free. I read much of the night and go south in the winter. And then it's like, somebody I was reading about was talking, this thing switches scenes a lot. It's like it's a play without telling us which character is talking and when, nor who they are. So it's like we have lines of dialogue and then different lines of dialogue without knowing who, like that it's a new person. But I think this kind of switches per people. So we have like a girl who's like April's the cruelest month and with the Archduke and hanging out. And it says, what are the roots that clutch? What branches grow out of this stony rubbish? Son of man, you cannot say or guess, for you know only a heap of broken images, where the sun beats, and the dead tree gives no shelter, the cricket no relief, and the dry stone no sound of water. Only there is shadow under this rock, red rock. Come in under the shadow of this red rock. And I will show, this lines have always made me really uncomfortable. And I will show you something different from either your shadow at morning striding behind you or your shadow at evening rising to meet you. I will show you fear in a handful of dust. I don't know why, but I always imagine like, you know, like somebody walking and then like the sun goes over the side really fast. And then like the shadow's here and then it goes like behind him. And it's just kind of freaky. And then like I will show you fear in a handful of dust. So to me, like now I'm imagining the guy walking across the desert and the sun's moving very quickly and scarily. And so it's like fear in a handful of dust, and I imagine just like I don't know why, I just imagine.
Blows in his face.
A little bit. Frisch weht der Wind, der Heimat zu, mein irisch Kind, wo will es du? I have no idea if that's right. Closer. You gave me hyacinths first a year ago. They called me the hyacinth girl. Yet when we came back late from the hyacinth garden, your arms full and your hair wet, I could not speak, and my eyes failed. I was neither living nor dead, and I knew nothing. Looking into the heart of the light, the silence. Ud und leer das Meer. I have no idea if that's right. Then we switch again. And we're to Madame Sosotris, which is finally, I feel like in the Madame Sosotris, I feel like I at least understand what's happening. Somebody's getting a tarot card reading. Do I know what the reading means? I do not. But I understand what's happening. Like I can make a picture in my head and I know what I'm looking at. Madame Sosostris, famous clairvoyante, had a bad cold. Nevertheless, is known to be the wisest woman in Europe, with a wicked pack of cards. Here, said she, is your card, the drowned Phoenician sailor. Those are pearls that were his eyes. Look. Here is Belladonna, the lady of the rocks, the lady of situations. Here is the man with 3 staves, and here the wheel. And here is the one-eyed merchant. And this card, which is blank, is something he carries on his back, which I am forbidden to see.
Huh.
I do not find the hanged man. Fear death by water. I see crowds of people walking round in a ring. Thank you. And I'm assuming somebody just paid her money. Thank you. If you see dear Mrs. Eckertone, tell her I bring the horoscope myself. One must be so careful these days. I think that's like, I don't know if he means for that to sound like the whole thing is bullcrap. I think the whole thing is supposed to be sound like bullcrap.
Yes,
like the tarot card, the whole thing is like, this is stupid. This doesn't work. And then like at the end, she's like, I have to bring the horoscope myself. So must be so careful. It's like what is this? False theatrics.
Yeah, she's supposed to sound like she's bullcrapping you, but the tarot cards are kind of legitimate in like, I think they kind of do carry weight in the rest of the story at least. I think they are kind of thematic.
Oh yeah, there definitely are some thematic links there.
Yeah.
But I still feel like the fortune teller is somewhat being made fun of in a sense. I feel it. I don't know if I'm right or if it's just something I'm putting on it. But I still feel uncomfortable by a fortune teller telling fortunes. I don't know. Probably just me being from the South. Good old Bible Belt. And be like, that's the devil. You know, but my brain is like not letting me be okay with this tarot card thing. And you might be okay with it, and I understand. Yeah. But like my brain is like automatically associating that with, oh, where's the hidden pentagram? Because it's got to be there somewhere. Which, oddly enough, was basically the symbol that Sir Gawain had on his shield. The pentangle, which is basically a pentagram without the circle. Pentagram is a pentangle turned upside down with a circle. Yeah, very weird. So, here we have this whole tarot card experience. I'm watching Game of Thrones. There's a character who has developed the ability to see everything in the past, present, and future.
Yeah, he practices divination.
Yeah, essentially, and he doesn't take payment. Like if you've got this like ability and you're like, oh, I now know the essence of wisdom is that I can't change anything, nor should I try. So I just sort of can relay information I know. But he isn't like he's not after anything anymore. He doesn't care.
In today's economy, the tarot card readers have to.
But she's like, oh, thank you for the payment that I got for this. It's like, you got to take payment for. If you're that good at it, why wouldn't you just use that to extract payment?
It's like the ones you presented this morning.
It's all so vague. Well, yeah, the card, yeah, exactly. It's exactly like that. Exactly like that. Here we have, and I've always thought this is, I don't know why these words are so cool together, but Unreal City. Yeah. So now we're switching gears again. Under the brown fog of a winter dawn, a crowd flowed over London Bridge. So many. I had not thought death had undone so many. So I guess dead people walking across this bridge?
And that also ties in, I feel like that also ties into London Bridges falling down in part 5.
Yes. Well, yeah, I never thought of that. Yeah, probably does. Yeah, it probably does.
There's so many dead there.
Sighs, short and infrequent, were exhaled, and each man fixed his eyes before his feet. Flowed up the hill and down King William Street to where St. Mary Woolnoth kept the hours with a dead sound in the final stroke of 9. There I saw one I knew and stopped him, crying, Stetson, you who were with me with the ships at Malay. Malay, I don't know how you pronounce it. That corpse you planted last year in your garden, has it begun to sprout? Will it bloom this year? Or has the sudden frost disturbed its bed? Oh, keep the dog far hence, that's friend to men. Or with his nails he'll dig it up again. You, hypocrite lecteur, mon semblable, mon frère. I have no idea what he says.
That's not bad.
So I get this just image of like a guy meets another guy he knew coming down the street dead. It almost sounds like zombies to me. And it sounds like it could be because he's...
like businessmen.
Yeah, businessmen too. Like we're all just walking to work. Yeah.
Following a routine.
Let's go do our typey. Because a lot of the things you see here, like even the jobs that are done, like later the girl is a typist. You know, it's like it's very much like not real work.
It's like real monotonous.
Yes. You're like a cog in a machine.
It's like busy work.
And you come to the machine and you set in the machine and you go out of the machine and you go home. Later we just won't go home. We'll just be part of the machine. That's what you got to look forward to. Actually, people now work at home.
Yep.
So that's kind of like you never leave the machine. It's like me going home and grading papers. Always in the machine. But then there's the month of May. Then we have Game of Chess, which I believe it relates to, we didn't mention the other one, the Burial of the Dead, but that was like a name of an Anglican burial ceremony. Okay, so I guess we're burying the dead, so we're getting the dead out of the way. Now we have Game of Chess, which it says here is related to like this common like chess narrative where like, such a weird story, but somebody's playing a game of chess with a mother, or the mother's playing a game of chess, and every move that she makes in the game of chess corresponds to some guy is in another room seducing her. Yeah, her daughter. So weird. So she's her daughter seduced in the room. I think it was a daughter-in-law. Yeah, mother-in-law. You're right. So daughter-in-law is being seduced in the other room, and so every game or move corresponds to that. So I mean, some weird sex stuff happening, basically, and some
weird sex
things that are questionable. Hopefully, will give us some key to what's going on here. And it's a very not classy, but at least rich, profusely rich, like environment that they start out in. The chair she sat in, like a burnished throne, glowed on the marble, where the glass held up by standards wrought with fruited vines, from which a golden cupidon peeped out. Another had his eyes behind his wing. I think you can think of like cherubs.
That's what I was thinking.
Doubled the flames of 7-branch candelabra reflecting light upon the table as the glitter of her jewels rose to meet it. From satin cases poured in rich profusion, and vials of ivory and colored glass unstoppered lurked her strange synthetic perfumes, unguent, powdered, or liquid. Troubled, confused, and drowned the scents and odors. Stirred by the air that freshened from the windows, these ascended in flattering the prolonged candle flames, flung their smoke into the lockeria. I had a guy on the reading I was listening to, he called it the Loquiaria. And I was like, that's not. It's got to be Lockeria, or Lockeria. You see our ceiling the way it looks right now? You've seen those really fancy ones in old buildings where it's like, it looks like foil or like metal, like tin up there. They started putting that in houses on like the HGTV network. Like really fancy looking ceilings that are reflective.
If I were to think fancy looking ceilings, I would think like molded tiles or whatever. Like they have little.
Yeah, crown molding, is that what they call it? Yeah. This is like the crown molding keeps going in the old like Lockeria or Lockeria ceilings. Stirring the pattern on the coffered ceiling, huge seawood fed with copper burned green and orange. Did y'all know, like when copper burns in fire, it has a orange, green flame?
I didn't know.
So if you take like you probably never did this, but take like a pile of old wiring from like that you were gonna just get rid of, and if you were doing a bonfire sometime around there, if you just took this pile of old wiring and you threw it into the fire, there would be like a little green part of the fire, like it would go poof, and then it would be green because copper, when it oxidizes.
But isn't that not good to breathe in?
Maybe not. I don't know. I was just saying if you did. I'm not suggesting anyone actually does. In fact, when you see, I think, green sparks on fireworks on the 4th of July, it's a cuprous oxide, I believe, that's being shot out. Gunpowder reacting and then burning with copper.
Yeah.
I think. So this is actually seawood that's got copper within it, and it's burning in the fireplace. So it's got like a cool, like giant piece of, maybe a giant piece of log, like a sea log that you would find like on, like near the ocean, like a tree that's like washed out and then washed back. Yeah. This fireplace is big enough to have that giant sea log, and then it's got copper in it, so it's burning pretty. Oh, it's a cool looking place. I always think of Citizen Kane when I think of this. Framed by the colored stone in which sad light a carved dolphin swam. Above the antique mantle was displayed as though a window gave upon the sylvan scene the change of Philomel. by the barbarous king so rudely forced. You know the story of Philomel?
I read it in the footnotes.
Yeah, the footnotes. But it's basically like a girl was, I think, raped by her brother-in-law. I don't know how, but apparently it was a victory when she, like a personal victory when she was changed into a nightingale.
Yeah.
I don't know how that's a good thing. I wouldn't want to be changed into a nightingale. And since the nightingale song plays so heavily in the story, in fact, I'll just hook this up so you can see it. Because I downloaded it last night.
The nightingale song. Is that the joke?
You're like, what? Like, I look at it, and actually it's a cute little thing, but when I hear it and I see it at the same time, it seems like a murder bird. Like, it seems like it could kill me. Like, if it really wanted to.
Maybe that's why it was like a victory, because now she scares him.
Murder bird.
To me, it is. But I mean, look at this. Look at this little thing. Watch how quick it is. Like, it's insane. So this figures heavily into the story, because later on we hear, like, sounds that are meant to sound like nightingale songs. So.
Yeah.
I never realized all those sounds you hear of birds singing were all the same bird. But it's like completely different little sounds and rhythms, all by the same bird, one after the other.
Oh, that's cool.
It's like a little sound machine gun.
It's like screaming.
What do birds say when they're in the tree? It's like, you know what sounds good right now? Yelling. It's kind of cute.
I wish I could talk that fast.
Isn't it insane? Like, I think it's just insane to me. Like, pure insanity of, like, that's what that bird sounds like that we were reading about, like, freaking John Keats is like, Ode and a Nightingale, that's the thing he's talking about in the tree.
Oh, I always thought it was like a huge bird.
No, I knew it was a songbird, I just didn't know it was that song. Like, it's a crazy
I had no
song.
I had no idea what a nightingale was.
It doesn't even sound like a song. It just sounds like these crazy rhythms of, like, really quick noises.
Yeah.
Like, but so later we hear some sounds, or he writes down some sounds that sound like a nightingale. So the nightingale is meant to, I guess, I got to look at this again. Philomel was raped by the barbarous king Tereus, husband of her sister Procne. Philomel was then transformed into a nightingale and refers ahead to his elaboration of the nightingale songs. I mean, it doesn't really say why. Then it says here, so rudely forced. That's what he calls rape. Like, she was so rudely forced. Okay. Yet there the nightingale filled all the desert with inviolable voice, and still she cried, and still the world pursues to dirty ears. I actually think that's meant to sound like one of those little bird sounds. Like, it says juk juk, but to me it's like, that's what I'm hearing, or something like that. And other withered stumps of time were told upon the wall. Staring forms leaned out, leaning, hushing the room enclosed. And we're still in that room, the really fancy room, which nonetheless seems pretty vapid of emotion. Footsteps shuffled on the stair, under the firelight, under the brush. Her hair spread out in fiery points glowed into words that would be savagely still. And I think this sounds like a really annoying conversation between two, like, not millennials, but like their version of millennials, like young people who don't know much yet. Yeah. By the way, I still fit into the millennial category technically. Yeah, like by like 2 years, I think. So I still consider myself to be young. Not as young as you, but like young.
Us, like the young, even like the younger people in this class are like the tail end of millennials, because the millennial section doesn't actually end until 2002 births. It goes all the way from like the 80s to 2002.
Which is a huge set. I feel like there's so much of a difference between you guys and me.
There's like a complete difference. That's why I don't understand why they like classes.
Nah, there's no official definition, but I just feel like I have to teach you guys different now than I did like 5-6 years ago.
Yeah, like I don't know why they like classify it as such a broad. I always heard a generation was 37 years.
That's a big generation.
Yeah.
In my family, it's usually like 18 to 20. Because for some reason, all my relatives, they get busy. Like, they're like, well, out of high school, gotta have a kid. No reason to wait any longer. I know that the population, like, we have less than... one of the reasons that college attendance is actually down across the nation, and this is not the reason, but one of the reasons is because millennials aren't having children. Or, like, there are less... Like, it's going to get, like, worse eventually because millennials don't have children at the same level that, like, say, baby boomers did. Like, there's going to be way more old people at some point than there are young people. And they're like, we don't know what to do. Yeah. Like, we don't know what we're going to do about Social Security. That's a terrible suggestion.
At a certain age.
All right, Hunger Games. Let's keep your dystopia inside. You're gonna upset the elders in the room.
Oh, sorry.
Like me. I will eventually be killed in that scenario. Let's see. Or you could like apply for an extension. I can just imagine that being a part of society.
It's like I'm still mentally well. Please keep me alive.
It's like I have plans. They're like, yes, well, you'll have to get those approved. And
it's like, well, you see, I can tell here you're developing Alzheimer's, so might as well significantly.
We got 25 minutes left. Here we go. So we got this conversation that sounds pretty emotionally distant from. She sounds like she's not really listening or caring about anything. She just is being overly emotional, and he sounds like he's just being serious. Like, it just sounds like a real relationship. Like, she's being like, and he's being like, like, that's what it sounds like, the whole thing to me. She says, my nerves are bad tonight. Yes, bad. Stay with me. Speak to me. Why do you never speak? Speak. What are you thinking of? What thinking? What? I never know what you're thinking. Think. I think we are in Rat's Alley where the dead men lost their bones. What is that noise? The wind under the door. What is that noise now? What is the wind doing? Nothing again, nothing. Do you know nothing? Do you see nothing? Do you remember nothing? I remember those are pearls that were his eyes. That's interesting. That was from the tarot card reading. Are you alive or not? Is there nothing in your head? And then there's like, I guess, a record on the background because this is like an old song. This is literally just lyrics from an old song back then. Like, oh, 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 that Shakespearean rag. It's so elegant, so intelligent. And she says, what shall I do now? What shall I do? I shall rush out as I am and walk the street with my hair down so. What shall we do tomorrow? What shall we ever do? The hot water at 10, and if it rains, a closed car at 4, and we shall play a game of chess, pressing lidless eyes and waiting for a knock upon the door. And so that's the end of that section. Two people having a conversation where neither one of them is really listening to each other. It sounds like a lot of conversation these days. You just have two people waiting to speak and never really actually listening to each other. And then we have people having a discussion at a bar, and where it's about closing time, and the bartender's like interrupting. And so I always read this lady like gossiping, because it sounds like gossip.
Yes.
When Lil's husband got demobbed, I didn't mince my words. I said to her myself, hurry up, please, it's time. Now Albert's coming back. Make yourself a bit smart. He'll want to know what you done with that money he gave you to get yourself some teeth. He did, I was there. You have them all out, Lil, and get a nice set. He said, I swear, I can't bear to look at you. And no more can I said. I didn't think of poor Albert. He's been in the army 4 years. He wants a good time. And if you don't give it to him, there's others will, I said. Oh, is there? She said. Something to that, I said. Then I'll know who to thank, she said, and give me a straight look. Hurry up, please, it's time. If you don't like it, you can get on with it, I said. Others can pick and choose if you can't. But if Albert makes off, it won't be for lack of telling. You ought to be ashamed, I said, to look so antique. And her only 31, because all her teeth fell out. She needs teeth. At 31, all her teeth are gone. I at least have some of mine. I can't help it, she said, pulling a long face. It's them pills I took to bring it off, she said. And she's had 5 already and nearly died of young George, meaning the pills that she took for her abortions. And she had sex while he was gone. Or while he was there, I don't really know. But she had sex, had abortion, like they gave her a pill, they gave her abortion, but the pill, oh my gosh, makes your teeth look, they fall out. That's unfortunate. And she says, the chemist said it would be all right, but I've never been the same. You are a proper fool, I said. Well, if Albert won't leave you alone, there it is, I said. What you get married for if you don't want children? Hurry up, please, it's time. Well, that Sunday Albert was home. They had a hot gammon, and they asked me into dinner to get the beauty of it hot. Hurry up, please, it's time. Hurry up, please, it's time. Oh, good night, Bill. Good night, Lou. Good night, May. Good night, Ta-ta. Good night, good night. Good night, ladies. Good night, sweet ladies. Good night, good night. Okay. So there's some gossip about lady having no teeth and getting an abortion while we're at the bar. Oh, nice. Again, it's just, I think it's like a feeling that sort of washes over you. Like, I'm uncomfortable with that. I don't like that. And it doesn't make the world feel like a great place when this is a conversation that feels like it could really be happening somewhere. Like when I watch Teen Mom and that's how people are actually doing things in life. Like, just like, no, this is life. This is that show Rattled. My wife's been watching. Then we have the fire sermon. Apparently the Buddha preached the fire sermon against the fires of lust and other passions that destroy people and prevent their regeneration. So lust prevents regeneration. The river's tent is broken. The last fingers of leaf clutch and sink into the wet bank. The wind crosses the brown land unheard. The nymphs are departed. Sweet Thames runs softly till I end my song. The river bears no empty bottles, sandwich papers, silk handkerchiefs, cardboard boxes, cigarette ends, or other testimony of summer nights. The nymphs are departed. And their friends, the loitering heirs of city directors departed, have left no addresses. By the waters of Lehman I sat down and wept. Sweet Thames runs softly till I end my song. Sweet Thames runs softly, for I speak not loud or long, but at my back in a cold blast I hear the rattle of the bones and chuckle spread from ear to ear. I always think of Joker there, like chuckle spread from ear to ear. Like, meant to be creepy. A rat crept softly through the vegetation, dragging its slimy belly on the bank while I was fishing in the dull canal on a winter evening round behind the gas house, musing upon the king my brother's wreck and on the king my father's death before him. White bodies naked on the low, damp ground and bones cast in a little low, dry garret, rattled by the rat's foot only year to year. But at my back from time to time I hear the sound of horns and motors which shall bring Sweeney to Mrs. Porter in the spring. Oh, the moon shone bright on Mrs. Porter and on her daughter. They washed their feet in soda water. Et eux se voix d'enfants chantant dans la campo. Then we have the bird again. So rudely forest. Well, that's Tereus. Like, it's also meant to sound like a bird. So we just have this random bird rape sounds. It's very strange. Now we're back to Unreal City. Unreal City. Under the brown fog of a winter noon, Mr. Eugenides, the Smyrna merchant, unshaven with a pocket full of current CIF London documents at sight, asked me in demotic French to luncheon at the Cannon Street Hotel, followed by a weekend at the Metropole. Which I think it said is like a hotel for homosexual sex. At the violet hour, when the eyes and back turn upward from the desk, when the human engine waits like a taxi throbbing, waiting, I, Tiresias, though blind, throbbing between two lives, old man with wrinkled female breasts, can see at the violet hour, the evening hour that strives homeward and brings the sailor home from the sea, the typist home at tea time, clears her breakfast, lights her stove, and lays out food in tins. Now, Tiresias is here because I guess we're talking about the fires of lust and passion and sex. And Tiresias, one time, he was a character in like Greek mythology. One time Tiresias, what was it? I think he smacked a snake with his rod and killed it. And as a result, he was punished by a god, because I think it was like some god didn't like that and turned him into a woman. Then like 7 years later, he saw, snakes having sex. That's what it was. He saw snakes having sex, and he was like, no, stop. And smacked him with a rod, and then he was turned into a woman. And then later he saw snakes having sex again 7 years later. And he's like, oh no, if I hit him again, I'll turn back into a man. And it did. He turned back into a man. So because he was a man who's also lived as a woman, and did that for 7 years and did like the full experience of being a woman, not just like, oh, I'm a woman, guess I'll just keep to myself. He still wanted the things you would, want as a lady that he got as a man. So he had sex as a man and had sex as a lady. And then he was asked to settle a bet, I think, by some of the gods. Which one was it? Juno and Saturnia. They said, which one has more pleasure in sex, men or women? And they asked Tiresias because he's been both. And he said, well, women. Because Saturnia was convinced it was men and Juno was convinced it was women. This pissed Saturnia off, and she struck Tiresias blind. So he's a man who has lived as a woman, but now is back to a man, and now he's blind. But Juno felt bad. So Juno can't make the change to them and give his sight back because of another god did that, so he can't undo it. So what he did instead was gave him the gift of future sight or prophecy, so he can predict the future and knows the future, but he can't see. And he once was a woman, now is a man, and he was a man prior. So this is a pretty crazy life. So Tiresias has. By the way, does anybody remember something that we read that had Tiresias in it in 1302?
I remember the character. I don't remember.
Do that thing where like students, they make that face where like, oh, I know, I just can't think of it. You know, it's like, oh yeah, like, y'all don't remember what? Say it again. Oedipus is correct.
Are we talking about Tiresias now?
Yes.
Yes.
You walked out of the room, Kate, and then everybody, I was like, where else have we seen Tiresias? I was like, then Enrique and Hayden finally came together and figured it out. Would you have known that off the top of your head?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I love Tiresias.
Yeah, so that's why Tiresias and Oedipus is all, Oedipus, you're not going to like what you find out, and you're basically hunting for yourself. And he's like, why are you speaking in these crazy riddles? And he's like, dude, seriously, like, don't do this. You're going to, he's like, Tiresias wants me out of, this is a conspiracy. You know? Tiresias is like, no, I just know things.
I just know things. I'm just smart.
So it's not me like against you. So Tiresias is here because we're talking about sex, and neither one of them seem to have very much pleasure in it. And Tiresias is the one who's like presiding over this, and it's like, why is he even? I even think like, why is he even there? Because like, what's happening doesn't sound fun for either party. So it says, out of the window, perilously spread her drying combinations, touched by the sun's last rays on the divan or piled at night her bed, stockings, slippers, camisoles, and stays. So it's a messy couch. I, Tiresias, old man with wrinkled dugs, that's what he's calling breasts, perceived the scene and foretold the rest. I, too, awaited the expected guest. He, the young man with pimples, arrives. I changed carbuncular.
So
he's got zits.
Yeah, so it's like a teenage man?
I don't know, he's got zits. It could be teenage.
A teenage man.
Teenage man. That's a oxymoron. A small house agent's clerk with one bold stare, one of the low on whom assurance sits as a silk hat on a Bradford millionaire. The time is now propitious as he guesses the meal is ended. She is bored and tired, endeavors to engage her in caresses, which are still or unreproved if undesired. Flushed and decided, he assaults at once. Exploring hands encounter no defense. His vanity requires no response. That's true love right there.
Yeah.
Exploring hands encounter no defense. Basically, she doesn't stop him, and his vanity requires no response. He doesn't even need her to respond. Like, he's like, she could just lay there and I wouldn't care. And makes a welcome of indifference. It's like, at least I don't have to worry about, seducing her. And I, Tiresias, have forsuffered all enacted on this same divan or bed. I who have sat by thieves, down below the wall and walked among the lowest of the dead. He bestows one final patronizing kiss. Oh, thanks, baby, I love you. Gropes his way, finding the stairs unlit. It's kind of one of those situations where he's like, yeah, I gotta go. I gotta wake up in the morning.
She's like not even replying. She's like...
Yeah, she turns and looks a moment in the glass, hardly aware of her departed lover. Her brain allows one half-formed thought to pass. Oh, well, now that's done, and I'm glad it's over. Mm-hmm. When lovely woman stoops to folly and paces about her room again alone, she smooths her hair with automatic hand and puts a record on the gramophone. Well, back to being here. So that's what a nice sexual experience, right? So romantic.
Yeah.
So wonderful.
So cute.
Basically, neither one of them seems especially affected by the fact that sex just happened. It just sort of happened. She goes back to what she was doing.
That's just how sex is nowadays, man.
I mean, it really is almost like, I wonder what Eliot would have said about Tinder. Like, this kind of is like a Tinder scenario without Tinder. Like he would have been like, so men are finding women just
to have sex.
Just like looking at a picture, saying yes, and then they show up and sex happens. Like that's even worse. You don't have to make a relationship anymore. Like no, you just show up, then it happens and you leave. It was like, good Lord. He would be like, of course this is where we've gone. This music crept by me upon the waters and along the Strand up Queen Victoria Street. Oh, city, city, I can sometimes hear beside a public bar in Lower Thames Street the pleasant whining of a mandolin, and a clatter and a chatter from within where fishermen lounge at noon, where the walls of Magnus Martyr hold an inexplicable splendor of Ionian white and gold. The river's sweats oil and tar, the barges drift with a turning tide, red sails wide to leeward swing on the heavy spar, the barges wash drifting logs down Greenwich Reach past the Isle of Dogs. Vala la Lea, Vala la Lea Lea. Elizabeth and Leicester, beating the oars, the stern was formed, a gilded shell, red and gold, the brisk swell rippled both shores, southwest wind carried downstream the peal of bells, white towers. Vala la Lea, Vala la Lea Lala. I don't know, don't ask. This is a very confusing scene for me. Trams and dusty trees, Highbury bore me, Richmond and Kew undid me, and by Richmond I raised my knees, supine on the floor of a narrow canoe. That's some weird word, like phrasing for sex. I raised my knees supine on the floor of a canoe. Like I raised my knees. So beautiful, like intimate. You know, men and women having sex.
A man or a woman?
I don't know. I don't think we're supposed to. I think we're supposed to just say somebody's. I'm assuming it's a woman.
Yeah, because like that's the only.
Because I don't know that he would have gone quite so far as to make a guy raising his knees in a canoe, having sex in the same manner, thing back then. He did mention homosexual sex at one point, but I don't think he would say that that's happening in a boat. My feet are at Moorgate and my heart under my feet. After the event, he wept. He promised a new start. I made no comment. What should I resent? Like, I guess they had sex and the guy cried. Says, I promise a new start. She's like, you don't have to do that. I don't care. On Margate sands, I can connect nothing with nothing. The broken fingernails of dirty hands, my people, humble people who expect nothing. La la. To Carthage then I came, burning, 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 burning. O Lord, thou pluckest me out. O Lord, thou pluckest burning. Hell. Oh, this is. It almost seems like when it's talking about burning, it almost literally seems like from about the point where the sex happens. And then we have like the river sweating, and it's talking about rivers and being on the river, and the water seems to actually provide no relief from the fire. Did you notice that? Like the fire seems to keep burning. It's almost like, you ever seen a picture? Like an old like you ever seen a movie where they're watching a film and the film gets stuck and the lens melts through the film and you see like the picture turn black and then like there's open circles where like it melted through.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And like you see that it almost like the poem itself does this at the end of this section. Like it just starts to turn into these little chunks. And you're like, burning, burning, burning. To Carthage then I came. Oh Lord, thou pluckest me. Burning. Like it's like I'm not seeing anything coherent. It's almost like it's burning itself up. Because it caught fire and it couldn't go out. But I don't know if that's right. And it's almost like the water that's there can't put the fire out because we don't really have water because the fertility's gone, regeneration's gone, relief is gone. There's nothing but burning. And then we have, we can maybe make it. Let's see. Death by water, which Ezra Pound, T.S. Eliot was saying, maybe we could take this part out. Ezra Pound says, no, this is really essential. Okay. Phlebas the Phoenician, a fortnight dead, forgot the cry of gulls and the deep sea swell and the profit and loss. A current under sea picked his bones in whispers. As he rose and fell, he passed the stages of his age and youth entering the whirlpool. Gentile or Jew, O you who turn the wheel and look to windward, consider Phlebas, who was once handsome and tall as you. I think his death in the water is meant to show that, like, it's no longer regenerative. He's just dead in the water, and that's what in fact, it's picking his bones clean. The fishies are, I guess. And he was once part of the profit and loss, the industry, everything. He was like a financial guy or like involved in the finances. You know, everybody's a cog in the machine at some point, and now he's being picked clean underneath the ocean. And consider this man who was once just like all of you, alive and well and happy, supposedly, and now dead underneath the regenerative water. almost like some sort of subverted baptism.
Yeah, in my notes.
Perverted baptism.
Yeah, in my notes I said it could be referencing baptism.
It's like being baptized instead of being born again and just dying.
So drowning.
And staying dead. I don't even know if he was necessarily. I don't know. Yeah, probably. Death by water.
See, like if I were to guess, it's like if I were to visualize it, it's like someone dunking this guy under the water and then him coming up on the other side in the afterlife.
Maybe, but that implies he comes back. I think he stays gone. It sounds awful.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound good. Like the coming back would be nice, even in a bad way.
It's promised on a lot of religions anyway.
Yes, it is, because people don't like the idea of death.
Yeah.
What the Thunder Said. I can never read that since that stupid song came out without sounding it that way.
Thunder.
After the torchlight, and this is where we're like kind of in the desert, the rocky area, and this is uncomfortable to me because to me, I think of this whole scene like every moment of me watching Mad Max Thunderdrome, but without the cars. Like just that movie, just so much desert and rock, and I just wanted to punch it. And that's how I feel in this. Like I'm just like, give me a tree, something.
Give me a tree here.
There's no water for relief. After the torchlight, red on sweaty faces, after the frosty silence in the gardens, after the agony in stony places, the shouting and the crying, prison and palace, and the reverberation of thunder of spring over distant mountains, he who was living is now dead. We who are living are now dying with a little patience. How nice. We're dying with a little patience. How pleasant. And this is, I read this like I'm freaking out, like it's a mini panic attack. Here is no water, but only rock. Rock and no water in the sandy road, the road winding above among the mountains, which are mountains of rock without water. If there were water, we should stop and drink. Amongst the rock one cannot stop or think. Sweat is dry, and feet are in the sand. If there only water amongst the rock, dead mountain mouth of carious teeth that cannot spit. Here one can neither stand nor lie nor sit. There's not even silence in the mountains, but dry, sterile thunder without rain. There is not even solitude in the mountains, but red, sullen faces sneer and snarl from doors of mud-cracked houses. If there were water and no rock, if there were rock and also water, and water, a spring, a pool among the rock, if there were the sound of water only, not the cicada and dry grass singing, but sound of water over a rock where the hermit thrush sings in the pine trees, drip, drop, drip, drop, 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 drop. But there is no water. It just sounds like he's freaking out. Like there's no water. There's just rock, and I can't spit, and because there's no water. Can you imagine there being so much water you can't spit? Like you go to your lips, and it's almost like Brian the Ancient Mariner a little bit. Who is the third who walks always beside you? When I count, there are only you and I together, but when I look up ahead at the white road, there is always another one walking beside you, gliding wrapped in a brown mantle, hooded. I do not know whether a man or a woman, but who is that on the other side of you? I think it's supposed to be Jesus. Or some reference to it, Jesus. It says in the footnote. What is that sound high in the air, murmur of maternal lamentation? Who are those hooded hordes swarming over endless plains, stumbling in cracked earth, ringed by the flat horizon only? What is the city over the mountains, cracks and reforms and bursts in the violet air? Falling towers, Jerusalem, Athens, Alexandria, Vienna, London, unreal. It's easy, it's supposed to make you feel uncomfortable and like the world's ending kind of feeling, and just kind of like this is actually where that music could be sort of almost like the music from like Psycho or something. Like just creepy. Things are getting bad. That just still feels too intense. What now? The music, you know.
Does the poem make you as uncomfortable as euthanizing old people?
No, I think I feel pretty bad.
Okay, just wondering.
A woman drew her long black hair out tight and fiddled whisper music on those strings, and bats with baby faces in the violet light whistled and beat their wings and crawled head downward down a blackened wall, and upside down in airs were towers, tolling reminiscent bells that kept the hours, and voices singing out of empty cisterns and exhausted wells. This whole section feels to me like an M.C. Escher painting. You ever seen those? Where it's like there's stairs on the walls, stairs on the floor, stairs in the ceiling, stairs everywhere.
I love those pictures.
Yeah, it's like it doesn't seem possible. Bats with baby faces, and they're crawling up and down the walls. It's freaky. I actually give Train Spotting. There's a movie where people are on drugs, and the guy like he thinks that the baby's crawling on the ceiling, and actually the baby's died because they weren't paying attention.
Morning when it's the a Stair City?
Maybe, but I've never seen it.
Do you know
I've watched 1 or 2 episodes of Rick and Morty, and I can't stand how he constantly is coughing, and it annoys me. Like when he's like, Rick Morty, and I'm just
burping.
I don't care. It's annoying, and I can't stand when people have like talking tics that they can't get rid of.
It's just to like explicitly tell you that he's always drunk.
I mean, I get it, and I don't like how he's always got junk on his face.
Because he's drunk.
Remember I told you I drink out of a straw because I hate like getting stickiness on my mouth. Like that's why I hate doing that because it gets your lips sticky. Hate sticky lips. So to watch somebody on my television have sticky lips that won't go away, it just drives me insane. It's almost as bad as this poem. Here we go. So we got 5 minutes. I think we can get to the end. Or we have no minutes, but I think we can get to the end in 5 minutes. In this decayed hole among the mountains in the faint moonlight, the grass is singing over the tumbled graves. Listen to my words. About the chapel there is the empty chapel, only the wind's home. It has no windows and the door swings. Dry bones can harm no one, only a cock stood on the roof tree. And a flash of lightning. And a damp gust bringing rain. Oh, the rain's back. Ganga was sunken in the limp leaves, waited for rain, while the black clouds gathered far distant over the Himavant. The jungle crouched, humped in silence, then spoke the thunder. Hey, whenever I say then spoke the thunder, like whenever you see those individual words pop up, I want you to say the word da with me, and then I want you to say the word that's after that. So data, dayadvam, and damyata. I think it's supposed to almost sound like that, like as a group. Like it sounds like this weird sort of refrain. So y'all say that. Here we go. Then spoke the thunder. Da, data. Oh, y'all don't see it on your text.
Hang on, let me get my phone.
I'll tell you what to say, then you say it. So say da, data. Okay? Da, data. I think it's supposed to feel like a giant like set of monks all saying it together.
Okay, Skyrim.
What have we given, my friend? Blood shaking my heart, the awful daring of a moment's surrender which an age of prudence can never retract. By this and this only we've existed, which is not to be found in our obituaries or in memories draped by the beneficent spider, or under seals broken by the lean solicitor in our empty rooms. Here we go again. It's going to be da yadvam.
Okay.
Da yadvam, okay? Da yadvam. Exactly. I have heard the key turn in the door once and turn once only. We think of the key, each in his prison. Thinking of the key, each confirms a prison. Only at nightfall, ethereal rumors revive for a moment a broken Coriolanus. Here it comes again. It's da damyata. Okay, da damyata. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Da damyata. It wasn't as big this time. Need more people. More people. Really? Da damyata. Close, Hayden. You were like, it was something. The boat responded gaily to the hand expert with sail and oar. The sea was calm. Your heart would have responded gaily when invited, beating, obedient to controlling hands. I sat upon the shore, fishing with the arid plain behind me. Shall I at least set my lands in order? London Bridge is falling down, falling down, falling down. Poisse ascose nel fuoco scelle a fine, quando fiam uti celedon. Oh, swallow, swallow, le prince di Akatan a la boy. Those fragments I have shored against my ruins. Why then I'll fit ye, Hieronymo's mad again. Data, dadyavam, damyata. And then we all pray like this. Ashanti, Ashanti, Ashanti. Like, what the hell's happening at this? Like, I don't even know. Like, it's just all this crap just thrown in front of us right at the end. It's like all of it's trying to like come together and like end, but I just feel like it's just still.
It's like when you try to write a conclusion right in the last minute of the due date.
This is like way worse. There is one thing I wanted to mention in this last section that I think would actually kind of help, but if you look down below the data dayadvam damyata, the fable of the meaning of the thunder is found in the Brihadaranyaka from the Upanishad. And a translation is found that means these are the 3 great disciplines. So the creator god, Prajapati, utters the enigmatic symbol da. He says there's 3 different groups. There's people, there's demigods, and demons. And he says da to each of them. And they all interpret it differently. They're like, one group thinks it means data, one means dadyavam, one damyata. And the ones that, it says the lesser gods who are unruly interpret it as control yourself, which is damyata. The humans who are naturally greedy as give. So basically we're greedy, so we're being told to give. And the demons who are naturally cruel hear dayadvam, which is be compassionate. So they're all interpreting the same phrase differently from the gods, or from the god. And they take it to mean what they think is the thing that they're supposed to be doing that they don't. So really, I think he's talking about here, the industrial wasteland needs to, or the economic wasteland needs to do whatever it needs to get fixed. The sexual wasteland, fix the powers of lust. And the war wasteland, stop killing each other.
Literally, it's the same thing like giving, controlling yourselves, and what was the other?
Kind of, and I think he's talking about all three in relationship to all the kinds of different wasteland that we have in this modern society, where we're losing our past and yet going toward new things. And he's doing the same thing he's talking about being annoyed by while he's doing it. It's just so weird. So if you felt uncomfortable, you were supposed to... What do we have next time? Auden and all them?
Yeah.
We have Auden and...
The other guys? I think it one's
Let me look.
or something.
I'm pretty sure that I covered all the stuff from the quiz. Let me look here. Let me go to course home and just check real fast. Okay, let's talk about what we have coming up. So we have W.H. Auden, Dylan Thomas, Philip Larkin. You can talk about whichever poems as you want to, but I'm not going to spend as much time as I Walked Out One Evening or In Memory of W.B. Yeats. But I will spend quite a bit of time on Musée de Beaux-Arts, Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night, Church Going, and Aubade. Aubade's such a great way to end the semester, too.
Is it?
It's about death and sadness.
That's the whole semester.
So then we have discussion posts, and next week we're going to be talking about those readings, and then day 10, which would be the following Monday, we're going to have the presentation day, hand out the review, and then exam the day after that. Are y'all going to be gone Wednesday, August 16th, band people? It's a Wednesday, so you might be gone.
We'll show up for the
exam specifically? Okay. That's helpful, because I was like, I don't know what I will do otherwise, because that's the last day. Get those research papers in if you don't already.
No.
Make sure your plannings are approved first. I had some people, again, I think I said this the other day, but I've had some people turn in who you would probably consider, you're like, wow, these are like the good students, have been turning in plannings that I've said, well, let's do another shot. And those other shots are going really well, but if there hadn't been those other shots and just a paper gets written, it would be bad. So don't just jump into the paper. Well, you all think it's one person, have like 4 or 5 people have had that happen.